Hello again, it's Tom, Three Basket Living. Intentional, responsible, and sustainable living. So, as I'm going through about my day, I'm trying to, recall some things that might be beneficial to other people, and I try to pass that along to them and share it with you. And today is no different, because I got to thinking, why aren't more people making homemade fresh tomato soup, jarring it up, canning it up, for the winter? Well, I got to thinking about it, and I think I know why. I'm not 100% certain. There's Henry. Hey, Henry. What's up, Bacon? Say hi to everybody. Anyhow, is because of the seeds. Most people, and I can tolerate either one, but most people do not like seeds in their tomato soup. So therefore, they don't like the daunting task of removing those seeds. And on top of that, when you remove the seeds, you're going to lose some of the gel or the meatiness of the tomato itself. And it seems like it takes a lot of tomatoes. There's Tater. Where you been, bud? Huh? There's Tater. You want to say hi? So, although this video is not about my recipe for making tomato soup, you can find hundreds or thousands of those across the world online, but you won't find a whole lot when it comes to smoke. So that's one thing that I want to share with you. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing if you've never had smoked tomato soup. I love this stuff. Secondly, is encouraging you to continue to grow on the smaller tomatoes that produce, like the yellow plum, abundantly, but you don't know what to do with it. And that's typically a problem for some gardeners, because they like their tomatoes and they grow so many of them, they don't know what to do with it. They run out of options. The primary option that most people take is making salsa. It's hard to beat a good homemade salsa. But salsa is not a meal in and of itself. And the same goes true with canning your own tomato paste, your own tomato sauces, pasta sauces, pizza sauces, things of that nature, and even stewed tomatoes. But typically all these other things become additions to something else, another dish or a recipe, like your salsa. Prepping is about food storage, and you want to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to space and what's in that jar. A lot of people can up complete meals when they can up stuff in the jars, and that's what tomato soup is. And if you do it like I do it or something similar, then you can condense it and not waste so much jar space or shelf space in storing up water. So that's another thing I want you to keep in mind when you're watching however this video turns out when I'm trying to do this, because I don't know how long it's going to take me trying to get footage of my process. I'm going to jar it up for more short-term storage, but it's a kind of canning process that I'm comfortable with. I'm not telling you how to can your stuff up, but I'm going to show you what I've been doing. And I'm going to show you how to get all those seeds out of those small yellow plum tomatoes, and maybe encourage you to continue to grow some of your favorite tomatoes you may have come across in the past, but you don't know what to do with all them little guys. This is a great option, and you're getting a complete meal in that 1 quart jar. And that 1 quart jar, doing it like I've been doing it, it is definitely 2 to 3 meals per quart. Smoked, roasted, yellow plum tomato soup, Three Basket Living style. I'll share what I got. Stick around. You will never ever want to touch a can of that condensed tomato soup in the grocery store once you had homemade tomato soup. So based on the same concept that the manufacturers do with the condensed soup that you get out of the store, why not condense it yourself? And all that's going to entail is just holding out more liquid than I normally would put in there when I make this recipe. So with the 10 pounds of tomatoes, a pound of carrot, you know, a couple bell peppers, a couple onions, and then all the dry ingredients, I'm going to try to get 4 quarts out of these 10 pounds of tomatoes. Maybe 5 quarts. We'll see how it goes. And if you're worried about, you know, how many jars you got, you might as well not store water, you know, like you would, you know, in salsa or stewed tomatoes. You might as well get a complete meal condensed in that quart jar. I just think it's more bang for the buck. Okay, I got my first 2 pounds of tomatoes diced up here. If you come in and you can see the centers of these things, these are kind of meaty. You can see the seeds and everything, but they're a whole lot better than the other tomatoes that I have utilized for doing this. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take me some olive oil. There's no measurement. I'm just going to drizzle it on there. I just want these tomatoes nice and coated with the olive oil. I just happen to be using a extra virgin olive oil. Dump them out here on this cookie sheet. The most tedious part of this process here is, one, doing what I'm doing now, flipping these half-cut tomatoes with the cut side up, and the other one is cutting up the yellow plum tomatoes. If you notice though, I'm not removing the seeds. I'm going to show you how to get the seeds out, not lose so much of the meat, and maybe you'll be encouraged to make more tomato soup. So you see what 2 pounds of sliced in half yellow plum tomatoes looks like on this cookie sheet. All it's got on there is a tomato coated in olive oil. All the other ingredients are staying put, and I'll show you why. So now what we're going to do is we're going to smoke these guys. Let's go outside. All right. So now I got a smoker going here. You can smoke with whatever you would. I'm just using oak. My purpose here in smoking, obviously, is not to cook. I'm not looking for high temperatures or anything like that. I just want to smoke the tomatoes for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. If you like a heavier smoke flavor, you can go longer, but we're talking tomatoes here, so they really take in that smoke pretty quick. 5 to 10 minutes, I think anything over 10 minutes is probably going to be overkill. Get timer going. I'm going to get the oven going here, and I'm going to get my next 2 pounds of tomatoes. I get the next cookie sheet while those are smoking out there, and get to slicing. So the other thing I wanted to touch on, and why I'm doing a tomato soup recipe, you know, Chef Tom here on 3 Basket Living, right, is I want to tell you about these yellow plum tomatoes, which I've never grown before. This is the first year, and I've been quite surprised at the production. I mean, very surprised. Right now, this after we make this today, this is going to be approximately, I think, 30 or 31 quarts of tomato soup that we produce just with the yellow plum tomatoes. Not to mention, we've given yellow plum tomatoes away to neighbors. We've given 5-pound bag, 2-pound bag, 1-pound bag. Those tomatoes, the tomatoes that have fallen off due to high winds or anything like that. Plus, we got Tater. You know, he loves tomatoes, and Bonnie too. They go out there in the garden, they'll pick them off the plants. We get a lot of tomatoes. We've estimated just so far, we're fairly confident over 80 pounds off these 8 plants, and they're still going. So that was another reason why Tom is doing a homemade fresh tomato soup, roasted and smoked for you all. So I got the second round here cut up, and again, olive oil. We'll mix it all up, and we're going to do the same exact process for these next 4 or 5 trays, 5 trays throughout the whole process. So when this first tray gets off the smoker here in about 1.5 minutes, yeah, then we'll go to the next step. All right, 8 minutes. That's what I've done on the smoking. You're not going to notice a whole heck of a lot of difference, but that 8 minutes of smoke is going to be very noticeable in the tomato soup. So now we're going to take it to the oven. All right, you can see I got my top rack out. This is just a little old studio stove here, so I work with what I got in this little cabin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer for 8 minutes. 8 minutes is my magic number for this process here. Yeah, go get them, doggies. Anyway, so that gives me 8 minutes on the smoker. I got 8 minutes to cut up the next 2 pounds of tomatoes. And then I put them on the top rack of that oven. But once I get them in there, then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put on broil and char all those open faces like you see on this tray. So I got it in there for 8 minutes. My timer will go off. I'm going to take the pan out and I'm going to flip it around so I get a nice even charring on the top of the tomatoes. That will give me 16 minutes. That's just my little number there that works out well, and so it's 8, 8, and 8 by the time the first batch gets done here. So as soon as it's done, we'll be right back. I'm going to go ahead and wait my first 8 minutes before I take my second tray out to the smoker. 16 minutes is up. All right, so what I do, since I have a stainless table here, I'm going to take my liquid here, which is my bone broth, the minced garlic, because I had to cheat this time because I don't have any fresh garlic ready. And the water I do not have in here yet. So I'm going to take first batch out of the oven. Looks like it might be going a little bit too much. And that's kind of what they look like. They're charred on top a little bit. And I'm going to set those here. I'm just going to get them all here to one corner. I'm going to tip them up here, and you can see it going into the broth here. It don't look like much, but that was 2 pounds of tomatoes. Set that to the side, put my lid back on, and it goes back on the stove, and make sure I got a simmer. So by the time I'm done with this, and I typically do 10 pounds of tomatoes. I do 12 pounds of tomatoes, but my pot over here, when I get 12 pounds in there, it just seems to be a little bit too much to work with. So I just decided to do it in 10-pound batches. So what that means is my first batch, if I'm looking about 15 to 16 minutes, timer. If I'm looking at about 15 to 16 minutes per tray, the first batch, by the time I get done, is going to be in there on simmering in my stock for probably, what is that, about an hour, hour and 15 minutes or something like that. I also have dry ingredients here. And let's go into mixing those up real quick. Organic cane sugar we're using, and we're going to do about 2 tablespoons. About a full teaspoon of oregano, freshly ground dried oregano, 1 tablespoon of basil, cayenne pepper. I'm doing just 2 shakes out of this. That's how big the holes are. I'm going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. Close enough. About 6 teaspoons of pink Himalayan salt. I'm going to do 1-2 shakes of this chili powder, maybe 3 shakes. 1 tablespoon of black pepper. 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric. All right, so now I got all my dry ingredients, and there's a reason why I'm just going ahead and incorporating them to the bowl, and they're going to be set aside right there. What I also have is I have about 2 medium-sized to whole onions. I have a couple of small bell peppers, small to medium size, that I pulled out of the garden so they didn't go to waste. And I've got about 1 pound of skinned peeled and chopped up carrots. I chop them up for a reason. Now these three ingredients here that I'm adding to mine, they're going to come into the picture later, and you're going to see why. Because we're going to go with a seedless tomato soup utilizing plum tomatoes. And got this pan oiled up. I've already mixed up the next 2 pounds, and we'll get these on there. And this will be my last tray of tomatoes. And then we're going to deal with the other vegetables. This is what 2 pounds of yellow plum tomatoes looks like on this cookie sheet. The measurements on this cookie sheet are this long by this wide. I don't know the measurements. Last tray of tomatoes going in. Broil 8 minutes. Now, at this point, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take my 2 medium to large onions. I'm going to take my 2 or 3 medium to small green bell pepper, and I'm going to take 1 pound of my carrot. Do the same thing we did with everything else. I'm going to slather it with some olive oil pretty good, and then get these things nice and coated. Got that mixed up. Take it on our cookie sheet. And we're going to process this here just like we did the tomatoes. Last tray of tomatoes. And this will give me 10 pounds of yellow plum tomatoes. Of course, I grow organically. I don't use any store-bought synthetic pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, nothing like that. So now, if you take a look here in the pot, that's about what our 10 pounds in. If I put another 2 pounds in, it just gets to be a little bit too much. So now what I'm going to do with this pot is now I'm going to just cover it back up. I'm going to put it back on the stove, and it's going to simmer. And while that's going, I'm going to go ahead and get the onions and carrots and peppers off the smoker. And we'll go ahead and get these roasting into the oven. All right, so now we got all our tomatoes in my pot, 10 pounds worth. We have 6 cups of bone broth in there. I've got 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And this time, because I don't have fresh garlic ready for me to put in there, what I'd normally do with that is put it on with the carrots and onions and the bell peppers if I use them. But I cheated this time, so I put 3 tablespoons of minced garlic out of a jar into this pot. So it's been in there the whole time. So now we've had all the tomatoes in the pot. They've been simmering for about another 20 minutes here. Our onions and peppers and carrot out. We're just going to set them to the side for the time being, for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and bring my pot over here. So I got my little emulsion blender. Get all this beautiful stuff here, and we're going to get it mixed in. Now this is going to take me, I don't know, it takes me probably a good 5 minutes because I want to do a real fine job here before we get to the next step. That's good enough. Now, here comes the part where we make this a seedless tomato soup. With all those plum tomatoes, without having to go to that very tedious task of trying to remove them seeds ahead of time like you see so many other people doing. Out of larger tomatoes, let alone plum tomatoes, we're going to use a kitchen sieve. So you can see the coarseness or the size of the holes. You know, I don't want to use something real thin like this. And believe it or not, this works. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start out here. I got me a big old stainless bowl here. You can see down here. And I'm going to just start taking this tomato soup and I'm going to take it through just like this. So then I just take this little silicone spatula and I just start running it around my sieve. This works real well. You just take it here, and all you're doing is moving it back and forth in this sieve. You're not trying to press it through the sieve. All I'm doing is scraping the walls of this sieve here, and you can see it fall out. And when I get to a certain point, what I'll do here is I'll just take the sieve and I will just tap it up against my hand, just like so. And now what you're going to start seeing here is you're going to start seeing a little glob. That little glob there is scratching up against the screen or the mesh of the sieve. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. And I'll just plop it into the bowl there. So that's what you got. Now the reason why I think this works, because I wasn't anticipating it working so well when I first did this. I think what happens is that those tiny seeds swell up. They swell with the bone broth or any moisture and liquid that's in the tomatoes, and that's why they don't travel through this sieve. So if you prefer to have tomato soup and you'd like to have homemade fresh tomato soup, but you don't like going through the task of removing the seeds, here's an easy way to do it. This here, I'm telling you, I can do this whole pot in the time it would probably take me to try to de-seed just one tray of those yellow plum tomatoes. Just like this. But I never attempted to try to press just that little bit of remaining soup that might be in there. This seems to do quite well. And then what happens to this? The pigs love it. If you got chickens, they would probably love it just as well. I'm going to plop that in there so you can get a good look at it, what it looks like here. I'd say seed and the skins of the tomatoes is pretty much what's in there. And this is what we have left. Now, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just give a quick rinse out of the same pan that I was cooking in. And as I'm looking at the bottom of this pan, I got no seeds. Give that a little stir. Now this is when I put in my carrots. And the reason ooh, that's hot pan, is so that I don't lose any of my onion and my carrot and my green bell pepper when I go running it through the sieve. So you can see why I wait till the last before I put all this stuff on a pan and smoke it or roast it, so I don't lose it. So any nutrition that might have been in the skins of those tomatoes, and I don't know if there is or not, I imagine there probably is, but I'm certainly going to gain it back with the carrot and onion and bell pepper. We got a nice creamy tomato soup with all the rest of those goodies. So I'm going to give all these dry ingredients that we put in that bowl earlier, they're going to go in. I need to give that a stir, and everything's just going to go in there at once. One more ingredient that I got to put in, and that is a little bit of that fresh basil that we just picked off the plant. And I saved it to the end because I don't want to lose it in the sieve. And this is going to go in the pot as soon as we get this cut up. That's about probably 10, 12, 15 fresh basil leaves off the plant. Let me give this a stir. We got a nice golden yellow mustard looking seedless tomato soup brewing there. Okay, so the other thing that I'm going to do now, besides clean up my mess, is I got 5 1-quart jars over here. I got rings. I got water here almost to a boil. And I'm going to go ahead and put 5 lids in there. I'm going to put these jars in the oven. I just put them on a little pan. I'm going to sterilize them with just some dry heat. The lids going into boiling or simmering water, so those are going to be sterilized as well. We've been going for another 20 minutes approximately. Take the lid off. A little boil going on there. So I'm going to take another 5 minutes here, and I'm going to run this immersion blender, and we're going to get everything nice and smooth. All right, so now we got a nice, creamy, thick, hearty tomato soup. These jars have been in there for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. So they are hot. You don't want to touch these things. I don't. I'm going to go ahead and place this tomato soup, this hot tomato soup, in the hot jars, put a hot lid on, and we're going to put a ring on there. I should let them jars cool just a little bit. And then I'll just continue to stir it like this, but I'm going to use the ladle to put it in my jars. Wow. Maybe I need to wait just a minute. Did you hear that? It's cooking. It's cooking down by my jar. I need to wait and let my jars cool just a little bit here. What I'm doing, I'm filling here these jars, and I'm leaving approximately, looks like a 1/2 inch of headspace. So you may be wondering, okay, this ain't really a canning process, but I kind of go through some of the same procedures that you would in canning when I go about it this way. And we've eaten jars, so far past 3 months. What we do, we'll fill these things up, and we're going to leave them set on the counter here, and they're just going to naturally cool to room temperature overnight, and we'll hear the cans pop just like we do in any kind of other canning, bath canning or pressure canning. But this is more of a short-term canning process, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. We didn't quite get there. If I would have added probably 1 more cup of water to that, that would have turned out to be perfect. We make sure the lid's sealed. So after these things are done, they get refrigerated. So that's important to remember, why I'm doing it this way. I'll do it just like canning, finger tight. So if removing the seeds is what's holding you back from making homemade tomato soup, I hope this helps out. Meanwhile, if you found anything edifying and beneficial, I would encourage you to share the information with other people. You don't have to share the video, but just pass on the information. Think about the tomato soup. Have a nice day. May all your branches become full of fruit, and I'll see you next time. Hooah!